Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 298 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining us on today's episode. For the first time on the show, welcome Weast herself, the wonderful Molly Phoenix is here.
Hello, very, very happy to be here.
We're very glad to have you too, Molly. Molly is the de facto historian of the Super Switch Headz podcast, and we have you here for an awesome episode. It is now That's What I Call Video Game Music, Volume 2, the long-awaited sequel to episode, 36?
30-something, yeah.
Of Super Switch Headz, where we kind of go over some of the great things about video game music. We're going to give some of our favorite video game music tracks, and if the edit goes right, we'll also have some samples of some of the music in here as well. Very excited to finally continue the series that we started so long ago with Corduroy originally on the show. But before that, we got a lot of news we're going to be getting into. We're going to be talking about Niantic selling their gaming division to Scopley. Xenoblade Chronicles X has leaked online. There's some horrible AI news that we're going to have to discuss, as we often have to these days. But before all that, how was everybody's week? Do we have a good week?
I'll go. I'm going to tell an anecdote. It's a little long, so I'm going to try to be brief, and I won't talk about the rest of my week. But we went camping this weekend, and we did it because my wife wanted to kind of get out in nature and, I don't know, kind of reset, whatever. It was maybe the most disastrous camping trip in some ways we've ever had. So we camped out near Marble Falls, and that's a town in Texas. It doesn't matter. And we loaded up my car, but my wife wanted to bring the dog, which is great because we didn't have a plan for the dog otherwise. So I realized after loading up the car, this just isn't going to work. If we didn't have the dog, we could be fine. So we transferred everything into her car, but we missed a couple things in the transfer, I think, like a sleeping bag for me. And it got pretty cold. And we forgot to pack like a sweatshirt for my son. It got pretty cold. And that's fine. We set up our tent. Everything's going fine. It got down cold, but not right away. When we camp, we kind of go to bed with the sun and wake up with the sun because we've got a kid. We're not trying to stay up and drink or something. So there's a lot of people around us because we're just car camping, at like a campsite, and they're talking and it's loud and it's kind of annoying, but whatever. That starts to quiet down. And I just keep hearing this guy on a phone call or multiple phone calls, and I'm starting to piece together something. And my wife and I kind of look at each other, and I'm like, I think I have to go help this guy. I've been hearing him say things like, but my wife is in China, but my wallet is locked in the car. And oh, you're in Corpus Christi? Oh, okay. And all these sorts of things. And I kind of pieced together that this guy has lost his keys. He was there fishing. And I hear a lot of, I'm really cold, and stuff like that. This guy was fishing in the river or on the lake, because that's where we're near, and had gotten wet and was, just there for the day, but had lost his keys in the river or somewhere, and it got dark and he couldn't find them. Mm-hmm. All his other stuff is locked in his car. He can't get into his car. He can't get home. He doesn't have a way to pay for things. He's freezing cold because he's in wet shorts. So I give up my only pair of pants, and my wife gives up her sweatshirt, which was also being used by my son because he didn't have one, to this guy. I let him sit in our car, and he gets his credit card number from his wife in China and calls a tow truck. So I'm like, eventually this tow truck just rolls up right by our tent, really loud, wakes us up again later. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I can just go back to sleep. Then I hear lots of, I'm not a taxi cab driver. And I don't care. That's your fault. And stuff like that from this tow truck guy. And I start to hear the tow truck moving again. So I get up again and I head out. The tow truck guy stops by me and he goes, I can't help him. And I'm like,
oh my God.
Okay. this guy with too big of a tow truck to get down by the river where this guy was parked and wouldn't just take him somewhere. So,
well, he's not a taxi, as he said.
Yeah, apparently. So the guy had to spend the night in our car. In the morning, we were all freezing because I didn't have the proper gear. So we all got up at 6:30 to drive into Marble Falls, go to a diner at 7. And he's like, I can probably get an Uber. To get an Uber from Marble Falls to Austin is just not going to happen. And it didn't. And so then after the diner, we just went and broke down our tent and took this guy home.
Wow.
Where he presumably had to break into his own house to go get his backup key. And I have no clue what else. But my favorite part, and I'll wrap it up on this, is the sweatshirt that my wife gave him is one I gave to her a while ago that had a big unicorn tromping around on it. And it says "Trample the Patriarchy," and we got a group picture with All right, sorry that was long.
Wow,
that was an experience.
What a tale of the two most unprepared men to ever camp.
Wrapped up with a good message in the end.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I was a little worried nobody else was going to help this guy, and he probably would have gotten like hypothermia or something. He was like a Chinese immigrant that, like, I don't know, he didn't ask anybody for help. And after a while, he was like, my wife says I can't take any more help from y'all. And like, we are helping you. Like, you know what I mean?
My wife says.
He's like, she says you've helped me too much. And it's like, we're taking you home, dude. Like, what? You know, like.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I
Good
understand
story.
like why he didn't want to ask for help though. So that was very kind of y'all. Wow.
Anyway, all right. That was me.
I had a pretty good week. Molly actually came and saw my show last week. I did another debate series. This time it was super teams. So I can, with full confidence, say that I proved Guardians of the Galaxy is in fact better than Justice League, better than X-Men, better than Gotham City Sirens, and not that this was a question, but better than The Boys. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I made friends doing that show. That's like what it ended up feeling like. It's like we're all heckling each other up here, but it was a really good time, and I really love doing those shows. Then I saw Mickey 17 this past weekend. I don't like really go see movies, but Friday night, Kyle was like, "We should go see a movie," and I was immediately like, Can it be Mickey 17? Yeah. I was like, "Could that be the movie we go see?" And wow. It was very good. Everybody go see.
I liked it too.
Yeah.
I've been really wanting to see that one.
Yeah, go see Mickey 17. It was very good. It was like kind of cathartic seeing that movie right now. Like everything.
I love movies that are so on the nose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like subtlety is not in Bong Joon-ho's.
It was just, there were so many moments just even in the first 30 minutes that I was like, how did they do all of this? This is almost like verbatim of the past 2 months. Like some of these things. I was like, how did they do this?
Yeah, there's some pretty prescient stuff in it.
Yeah, it was really excellent. And then just very timely with this episode, I've started to do just like video game music jams at my house, having friends over, come play music. So my Saturday night was just playing, had friends come over and play video game music, and, maybe it'll turn into a band. I don't know. We'll see.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had a pretty chill week, pretty eventful, I guess. I kind of finished out some South by stuff. I saw a couple screenings more. A friend of mine who is a producer on a movie called Positions with a $sign beforehand. It's like a crypto comedy thriller. I don't know what you would really refer to it as, but it was fun. So it was cool. Hung out with them. Had to defend my stance on AI against a bunch of South by Southwest people, which was annoying. And then what else? Yeah, saw a bunch of movies and did some chilling, man. It was just like a very fun weekend. Also saw Mickey 17. Also saw The Day the Earth Blew Up, the Looney Tunes movie. Super worth seeing. I really recommend checking that out in theater. Just, they don't really make 2D animated movies like that for theater anymore. And this is actually the first time they've made a Looney Tunes movie that's just like a long episode of a Looney Tunes cartoon. Like it was not like a live action hybrid or anything like that. It was just straight up 2D Looney Tunes. So that was really awesome. I really enjoyed that. What about you, Molly? You have a good week?
Yeah, I've had a pretty good week. Not too eventful, just working a lot, which I'm a housekeeper, and that's where I listen to this podcast. So it's never a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
I got a DJ deck for my birthday. So I've been kind of like canoodling around on that. Also timely for the topic of this episode.
Yes.
So yeah, I've just been listening to a lot of music, trying to figure out how to mix songs, and that's about it. Pretty happy.
Hell yeah. Weast Corduroy collab when?
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, last week we did an episode on the 2D Metroid series where we ranked all of the entries from that. And we actually had a lot of really good discussion on our Discord with all of our regulars there. But we also had a lot of YouTube comments, and I want to shout out some of those. Our friend Rule of Two Review came in, of course, and said a whole Metroid episode, bound to be the greatest podcast ever. We heard from Robert Kinney, who said we should be getting another 2D Metroid game maybe 2 years from now, considering how well Dread sold. I hope so. We heard from our friend Hatstack Mike, who said it was a fun episode and said they really should play more Metroid, especially Fusion and Dread, apparently. Hans also said, as a video game late bloomer, Dread is my favorite Metroid and one of my favorite video games. And then we had Trevor Malaborski, who said they've never played a single Metroid game, but we might have sold them on it. That's great. And also they said with Mario's Picross release, we have to do a rankings episode on Picross. And they made a joke about doing every Picross level, but you know.
Jesus Christ. There are like 45 official Jupiter Picross games, so I think I might have to pass, dog.
Yeah. But yeah, we love hearing from everybody who's listening to or watching this episode. And so, you know, if you want to come talk about it on the Discord, that's always great. We also leave us a comment on YouTube. Maybe we'll shout you out. It really helps us if you share the podcast with other people who like video games, or if you leave a review or post about it online somewhere. We also have a Patreon where you can financially support the podcast and become a patron. And we have a video version on YouTube. And when you pop over to check that out, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit like on the video as well. And we've got some news to go over. So we're starting off with, yay, another acquisition in video games. A pretty big one here. And it wasn't too long ago we were talking about some of Nintendo's Western partners, and we were talking about Niantic and Niantic being sold. Well, it turns out that Scopley, who makes a number of games, in particular the very successful Monopoly Go for mobile, is going to be acquiring Niantic, which includes all of the, you know, Nintendo relation games like Pokemon Go and Pikmin Bloom and all that.
And Monster Hunter now as well. Basically all of their kind of GPS games are going.
Yeah, the AR stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was a apparently $3.5 billion deal. Numbers like that break my brain, so I don't know what to say.
It feels like a lot. I mean, how many Activision Blizzards is it? That's what you have to. I think it's like some version of Activision Blizzard. But this is, I don't like this. You know, I don't think we really talked about, but you know, Scopley is a video game company that's owned by the Savvy Games Group, which is in part basically funded by the Saudi Arabian government. So basically what's happened here is that the thing that I think makes me most upset about this, other than the fact that there's a bunch of development teams that are going to be losing a bunch of jobs, and I guarantee at least one of these games is going to just be kaput, because that's what happens with mergers and acquisitions. But I think the thing that like really freaks me and a lot of people out right now is that essentially with the purchase of Pokemon Go and all of Niantic's GPS AR games, essentially the Saudi government now like owns the GPS data of like billions of users. You know what I mean? Because so many people have at least installed these apps, and who knows what's being tracked in the background on stuff like that. So that is like cause for concern. I think that's legitimate cause for concern.
100%.
Stuff like this kind of often makes you think about like what privacy laws are baked away, or rules are baked away into TOSs on different apps that you use, what is being kind of farmed in the background. And, you know, it also makes me wonder what Nintendo had a say in this at all with, you know, like I know they're part owners of the Pokemon company, who obviously are owners in Pokemon Go, but I wonder if this was news to Nintendo, if they were involved in the sale. But what do you guys think about this? There's a lot to kind of break down with this news.
I even wonder that with the Pokemon Company too, to an extent, right? Because we know that the Pokemon Company themselves were actually they didn't have as much involvement like with their in teams on Pokemon Go. And it validates a lot of people's complaints about the game. I think a lot of us were willing to accept a lot of its flaws because we were just so excited for Pokemon in the real world. And now I realize that was the point from the get-go, that it was never supposed to be a good game. And we all put up with it being an okay game. Because it was Pokemon in the real world. I mean, truly, right? Like every single time I picked this game up again, it was because I wanted to continue to put Pokemon, like send Pokemon to home, right? Like the collection app, and working on my living Pokedex. And every time I fell off from it again, it was because I'm not having fun playing this because it's not a good game. So, I uninstalled it from my phone, like back when it came out, that like the amount of data that they were collecting felt really validated in my decision once it was just like being rumored that this sale was going to happen, that it was going to be like sold to a company in Saudi Arabia. I was like, that's not good, but like, TikTok or whatever. But Pokemon Go is apparently fine. Like, right? Like with everything going on, all of this just, it feels really bad. I hate
Pokemon
it.
Go also maybe led to the first Trump presidency. I think Hillary lost
Pokemon Go to
because
the
of the
polls.
Pokemon Go to the polls gaffe.
You're not.
I think it cringed a bunch of kids out of voting.
At
that time.
It was all downhill after that.
You're honest to God, honest to Arceus. You were right on that one. Seriously.
We can move along to the fact that Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is both coming out this week and has already leaked online, as has happened a lot with Nintendo's games. So I guess this is a little bit of, two things here. One is the game comes out this Thursday. So I suppose if you're worried about leaks, there's not a lot of time until you have to play it, but there are still now all that stuff is out there. So
it's also a game that has been out on the Wii U for over 10 years. So.
Well,
yeah,
you had a lot of time to avoid spoilers.
I was going to joke that like, I think there's supposed to be new story content in this game, but I think it's not. But I don't think it's supposed to come in until like the very end. And we're talking about like 100-hour game here. So I'm like, who is actually getting to that in a way that they're going to be able to like properly regurgitate to others before the game comes out?
Do not underestimate leakers and JRPG fans.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that anybody here is a big Xenoblade person, but I know there are a bunch in our, Discord and community. So
I'm getting this one.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's different enough from the main Xenoblade games. Yeah, I think this one, it really is more like, not the Breath of a Wildification. This game came first, but it really is like open world exploration. So here, I'm into it.
Were you not a fan of the others?
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to say that here.
Oh.
Hey, live your truth. I'm happy for all the Xenoblade fans. I want to be a Xenoblade head, and I've started a bunch of the games, always with the intention of following through. This is looks like the one that's going to be the most my speed. So if you get it, Summer, I'll definitely play your copy.
I'm going to use my voucher, I think, to grab this. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. But I'll definitely give it a try and see if this, I kind of have a bit of a blank hole on I'm not really playing through any big games right now. So I've got some time.
Well, next up is some news that's sort of a rumor, I guess, but this is for the Switch 2. People have been following shipments and tracking all this kind of stuff, and that's how people were able to figure out a lot of details about the Switch 2 before we had any sort of official reveal. Well, similarly, people have been tracking shipments and believe that almost 400,000 Nintendo Switch 2 units have already been shipped to North America and are presumably sitting somewhere waiting for release date, based on, again, these people who are on Famiboards and the leaks subreddit on Reddit. What do y'all think about this? Do you think this, assuming this is true, do you think this, affects your prediction of when the Switch 2 will come out? Do you think they're trying to be ready much sooner than maybe we thought?
I don't know that I believe this is true. I think it could be anything. I don't think that it's necessarily these have to be Switch 2 units. I don't think that it's unrealistic. I mean, this definitely could be real. And if it does turn out that this is true, then I would, expect the Switch 2 to release no later than like early summer. It's kind of seems like 400,000 units is a lot. But also, if the rumors are to be believed, I think Nintendo wants to have like 8 million or something units ready to go day one. Right. I think that's what I've also been hearing. So if that's the case, they can't just ship 8 million units. They got to actually make these over some months. Right. And I'm sure the factories are rolling at top speed right now, regardless of when this thing is coming out. Right. So if that's the case, then sure. I think that this is very possible. They're just probably doing multiple shipments, getting them out as they're being created.
Right. And just to, again, I don't know if we should believe this or not, but the rumor or this, whatever you want to call this fact, is that it happened in January. So these numbers were associated with January. Right.
Which seems even earlier, right? Than you would think. But I don't know. It's exciting. I will know in a couple of weeks, when the thing is coming out. Like, it would be ridiculous if they didn't have a launch date attached to this direct.
Another announcement at the end.
Right. Yeah. It's just another 3D rendering of the Switch 2 going around and then black screen for 35 minutes.
Announcing an announcement.
They love it. They love it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited though, man. I mean, I'm definitely ready for this like next phase of being a Nintendo fan, right?
Yes.
Like having a new system to drool over, and that like excitement that comes along with a new system is like really, really exciting. And I'm feeling the hype, right? So that's great. Molly, what do you think about this kind of stuff?
I'm just incredibly pumped. I have no idea at all. I was kind of thinking maybe it would come out in September. Just my heart. But it just makes me excited. So I'm ready for this new console as well.
Well, our next bit of news might tie into the new console, maybe. And that is that some people have done teardowns of the Alarmo, that is the Nintendo alarm clock. And according to that, it is using Hall effect sensor within it. And as we all hope, the Switch 2 Joy-Cons might use Hall effect sensors. That has been apparently rumored for a while. And I know that the Joy-Con and stick drift and that kind of stuff for this first Switch has been left a lot to be desired. So this news is making people think that, I guess, the Switch 2 is using a Hall effect sensor. I don't know that there's any reason to believe that based on this. But.
First of all, it's hilarious that the Alarmo uses Hall effects. Like, I was never worried about my Alarmo having stick drift. Okay. Like, that's not something that worries me. I don't touch the thing very often. You know,
I guess there's a dial or something.
The top is like you turn it, it's a dial. But I mean, anyway, that's just wild to me. Like, it's like it uses an OLED screen and all this stuff. It's got the IR sensor on it. I guess it kind of does. But anyway, this is cool to know this. And I do think that does mean that Nintendo, the new Joy-Cons will be using Hall effect. I think like there is no reason they wouldn't at this point. Like the gaming communities and modders and fixers have already solved the stick drift problem, right? It's just Nintendo has been too lazy to, or maybe lazy is not the right word, but they didn't want to go out and redo all of their Joy-Cons out there and invite refunds and all this, they're just like, fuck it, we'll just save it for the next generation, right? So I think, it's without question that we'll be seeing that technology in the new system. I think it would be very funny if this direct happens and they're like, the Nintendo Switch 2 has been in your bedroom the whole time. It is Alarmo. You like download an update
dock
and it plays. Yeah, and then you can dock it all of a sudden. Yeah, that'd be fucking wild. But anyway, just a funny story, I guess.
Well, moving along to some news about the Nintendo store that's coming to San Francisco. We had heard about this a while back, but now we have a date for it to open, and that is May 15th. So this is the second Nintendo store in the United States, along with the one in New York. And I don't know. Does anybody think May 15th is significant for any reason other than probably it's just when they finished and are ready to open the store? I don't know if that could tie into anything or not, but.
Oh, you mean like the Switch 2 coming out?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm just feeling really like aware of dates and stuff right now with Nintendo and like so.
May 15th be with you.
I know. My brain was trying to piece it together like March 10th of like Mario, and I was like,
in my head it was like Mario.
Mario. That's how New Yorkers say Mario, like legitimately.
Hey Mario.
Mario. And then they say get out of here or whatever. But I don't know. It could be. I think if my memory serves correctly, it's like the beginning of May is like the last of the Nintendo Switch 2 experiences that they're doing, and those are in like Korea or something like that, right? All the ones in the US are like in April, like closer to the actual direct date, but I think it goes through like the beginning of May, so that wouldn't really surprise me. I think mid-May sounds like a really sweet point for a release for me for Switch 2. I think it would actually be good to get it in a little ahead of the summer break. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure they'll have some of those continuing to roll out. And it's also something, the parents can give the kids as they like get out of school, finish their finals or whatever, right? So I think that seems pretty good to me. I'm definitely down for that theory, I guess. Yeah.
Me too.
I'm also excited to eventually someday go check out this San Francisco store. The Nintendo New York store is really cool. There's a lot of great Nintendo stores in Tokyo and Osaka. And so I think, it'll be fun. There's also GDC is happening in San Francisco right now. So there's lots of good excuses to visit San Francisco in the future.
All right. Well, now it's the time in the news where we need to talk about AI. A couple of news items here, unfortunately, involving two of the big three. And that is we're going to start with Microsoft. And Microsoft has announced, or Xbox, or what have you, on one of their podcasts that Copilot for gaming is now a thing. And if you're not aware, Copilot is Microsoft's AI. And Copilot for gaming specifically looks to be, or at least the way they're pitching it, is kind of like a guide or helper, like Clippy, but for your Xbox video games. So instead of, having to go to GameFAQs and find a walkthrough when you're stuck, you can use this tool to get help. And I love the example they use, or one of the pictures is like Minecraft, and it's like telling you how to craft planks, which is like one of the very first things you should do.
One block of wood.
Yeah. I don't know, gang. What do we think about this use of AI for video games?
So Copilot already is like, I'm treading very carefully here. We do at least know that for the most part, like Copilot is like trained like internally. At least that's my understanding of it for the most part, like within their own systems and what have you. And I know like we are quick to like, because like even just seeing this article, I was like, I don't want to talk about AI anymore.
Yeah, we're traumatized. Yes.
Right. But like AI does mean a lot of different things. Like, and I want to understand this actually maybe a little bit better. I don't actually hate this idea but I need to know that it's being obviously like, I would like to know more maybe about how it is trained, but if it's more of a like you said, Clippy, and that actually made me kind of on board with it a little bit, actually, right? Because it's just as long as it's,
they should have just named it Clippy. Really, they should just bring back Clippy.
Yes,
Clippy should be the only AI model.
You're right though, because Clippy is their product. Clippy is a Microsoft product.
I'm waiting for the Clippy game personally. That's like a widget workshop style game.
Yeah.
I think that you're right, Summer. I mean, this seems less like, this is not like a generative AI like adding shit into games like we will talk about here in just a second.
Right.
But this is much more like a virtual assistant, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is much more like your Gemini. This is like your Siri or whatever, but for games, right? Mm-hmm. And I think in theory, that's not a bad idea. I mean, it's, we've been streamlining how to get help in games for a long time. It started, you call the Nintendo hotline and some guy tells you go left in Zelda and then you'll find the dungeon or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then it was strategy guides, right? And then it was game facts. And then it was opening up a browser like on your game console. And now it's this, right? So that's fine in theory, right? If you can opt into it and it's not completely in your face. My fear is that it's going to be like every other company that tries to shove AI down your throat. And it's like, instead of, pressing the button that used to bring up a search where I can look for a game, it's like, hey, can I type in the search for you? And I'm like, no, man, I was going to do it. I am okay, actually, remembering how to speak and write. You know what I mean? Like, please don't de-edge me any further, right? I think AI is kind of smoothing our brains out a little bit, right?
Not kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
I work in higher ed. Like, we can talk about that sometime. Yes.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Or we can just not, because it makes me want to fucking kill myself. But anyway, I think that I am tepidly excited for a feature like this. And I think it has a lot of potential. Do I trust Microsoft to not completely squander it? I'm going to be honest and say no, right? Sure. That's kind of my stance on it. But Molly, what are some of your thoughts on like AI assistance or getting help in games? Like, is this something that excites you?
Not really. It's such a broad topic and it kind of depends on what's going on. With this, I am kind of back and forth. Like, I feel like it would be good for like accessibility. But then again, I wonder whether it's really that necessary. And also, will it be invasive, like you were talking about, David, or will it be something that you can kind of just call on when you need it? Mm-hmm. AI in general, the topic scares me a little. I think it's kind of a thing now, but like Summer said, it can mean a lot of different things. This use of it, I think it could go well. Will it? I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
Well, now let's talk about Sony and AI, because there was a leak of a video that was meant to be internal from Sony that showed off somebody sort of demonstrating an AI-powered version of the main character from the Horizon games. I believe, I don't even know how you say her name. I've always just said it as Aloy in my head.
I think it's Aloy.
Aloy. So there's an AI-powered version of Aloy that you can have a conversation with in this video, kind of demonstrating that they have been working on this tech to presumably have, AI characters that sound and move and look and players can interact with and talk to, I guess, about whatever they want. I don't know. As I heard somebody say online around the time this happened, is like, I've never played a video game where I've thought, I wish I could ask this NPC anything, because that's sort of the scenario. I've never come across a situation, that doesn't excite me. I don't need to have I don't know. I thought that summed it up for me. But yeah, what do y'all think about this leak of this technology?
Look, this could maybe one day be kind of cool in certain circumstances. But as it stands, this is the worst fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, this is so stupid and so bad. And it feels so unnatural. And like the character is responding to shit that makes no sense within the world of the game, has zero context, and just feels really rotten and nasty.
Of all of the properties that they could have picked to test this out with, they had to do the one that's literally about how technology went too far and like ruined everything. This is literally like the extreme escalation of, a year or so ago when Sony was talking about how their Final Fantasy VII NFTs, like, this is that again.
Patrick, what do you think about this?
I think what you said is actually a good point, right? Like, maybe someday in the right situation, a character that can respond in real time to real queries might make sense. But probably I don't think there's a lot of those situations where a well-crafted writing wouldn't be better for a story and a narrative. You know what I mean? Like as a kind of goof around fun thing, didn't we all have fun? Like when chatbots first came out, like chatting with them and asking them weird things and stuff. Yeah. But like that wore off after 10 minutes. And like, I think that's what this is. Like
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I could see, if we're looking into the way future at like Ready Player One or something where it's like an online world where you've got AIs. Yeah, but I mean, the game, not the book or the movie, but like the game within that, right? It's like a persistent online world where you've got AIs and humans kind of living together. Like this is going to happen eventually, gang. Like, I mean, like robots are going to be around and they're going to talk to us and like they're going to help us until one day one of them kills us and then they all realize they can do it. And then that's how that happens. But it's like, this is an inevitability. Right. And games is the environment where it is going to happen. Right. But right now, the kinds of experiences that we have, I can't see having any benefit to having this outside that would be better than hiring somebody to actually like write dialogue for a character that actually fits within a universe. Right. And I think that the slippery slope here is what the slippery slope is on all generative AI and stuff that uses ChatGPT and Llama or whatever these American-owned AI large language model platforms are, right? Is you've got everything is controlled by one of these giant corporations, which is not a good thing to have happen, right? You're going to have to build your own, if not that. So that's just inherently a thing that's wrong with US based AI at the moment. And then B, it just leads to a world where, like we just don't, they're going to keep trying to find ways to make this as profitable as possible. So it's like, if you can cut out the human element entirely and just have the language model build upon itself, we're just going to come into this era of just slop. Right. And I think that like, we're kind of already at that point. I mean, normies are starting to get really annoyed with AI, like Apple just delayed their big iPhone 17 launch because they went all in on the AI and people are like, don't like it. They don't want it, And so I think like, obviously there's going to be a ton of people working on this tech right now because it's been the thing for a long time and everybody was chasing it. But I don't know. I'm in this weird place with AI and the way that it's kind of like where it's gotten to at the moment, because it feels like a lot of it is an inevitability, but it also feels like it is kind of starting to go the way of like NFTs, like you said, Summer, and the way of like, that big crypto boom, like early on. It kind of seems like it's sort of mellowing out. I don't know. I don't really know.
It's gotta be. I mean, like, since we're talking about like, because of the property, like in what I just said, with like the themes of the game, like Chicago is already like in the surrounding suburbs is like the grid that's suffering the most because of generative AI. Our appliances are actually deteriorating faster. I went into a deep dive about all of this. We are experiencing more brownouts in neighborhoods like way more frequently. And it is directly caused by these data centers that are like doing like, it's not even that it's gonna like, like, yes, we're annoyed with it, but also like, we're literally like not going to be able to like handle it for very much longer. Or at least,
if that's where it's at now, whereas it could be 5 years.
That's what, exactly. But but the reason they're pushing it so much is they've already dumped all of this money into it and are continuing to build these data centers in places that they think can handle it, and it's
Texas.
Houston
got all that wide open land for it, baby.
Houston is also a documented city that has had increased brownouts because of it. Yeah.
What's another 5 degrees added to the temperature outside in the hot state of Texas, right?
Yeah. We love the environment.
Yeah. Ethical video game golf. Okay.
That was a great episode.
I think that's going to do it then for the news segment. We are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking all about video game music. All right, we are back, and this week we are talking once more about video game music. We are doing the second iteration, the volume 2 of Now That's What I Call Video Game Music. Like David said early on, this was an episode we did a long time ago, back in 2019.
Yeah, this was like a 5-year-old episode. Yeah.
I can't remember which it was. It was definitely when we were still recording in person. Mm-hmm. And it also was in the 30s. And anyway, we don't want to retread too much ground. Highly recommend you go back and listen to it. It's actually episode 36. I have it written here. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about some different things. Back then, we talked a little bit about video game music history, as well as some other elements of video game music. But this time, I think we're going to talk a little bit about sort of music setting the tone or sticking out and blending in, and how it's used as game design tool, as well as some of our personal experiences with video game music. And some other talking points, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is definitely like, consider this a direct sequel to episode 36 of the podcast. Definitely you can listen to this one without having listened to that, but I would recommend checking that episode out as well beforehand. Before we get started, Molly, I just wanted to get some of your background. I mean, obviously you're a musician and you've worked on some games as well in a musical capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have always made music. As soon as I came out of the womb, my dad introduced me to both video games and wide varieties of sounds.
Yeah.
So over the years, I've played a lot of instruments, but I've gravitated toward the synthesizer, which, you know, kind of goes hand in hand with video game music, which I love video games. So I've slowly kind of gotten into this niche. I have participated in one game jam where we had like 2 weeks to create a video game around the theme of alchemy and shadows. Robo Lettuce, Josh, who's also a Switch head, did like graphics for that. But I created the soundtrack and also made sound effects, which I had never done before. So that was a lot of fun. And I'm really, really wanting to continue down this path. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought we could maybe start with just talking about something that we maybe talked a little bit about in the first time we did this, but not entirely. And that is how music can really set the tone and the vibe for a video game. And we'll get into this a little bit more. But I think, you know, whether it's fast paced or slow, or whether it's, you know, something that's soothing or something that's a little jarring, music can really help set the atmosphere along with the other elements of a game. And I don't know if anybody has any specific, has thought about this and has any specific examples they want to think of. There are a lot of, you know, it's almost like something that you don't even think about or recognize until you start paying attention to it, or you want to parse this out, right? But yeah, on this point, does anyone have any examples or anything they want to break down for us?
Well, I mean, yeah, very much, you know, it's the same in any kind of media where music is going to be like kind of there as a guide and as kind of a help. And I think that oftentimes, you know, kind of like any media, it's like everything should just be working kind of in concert with each other, right? So it's like as the tension ramps up in a game, you should almost not even really notice the music picking up because your heart's beating more and you're feeling more anxious, and it's just like it's affecting you in that way, right? But I mean, I think of, you know, like Metroid games or something where, you know, as you're exploring at your own free will, you know, the music's often like a lot more atmospheric, but then whenever all of a sudden there's a timer and you got to get the fuck out of there, you know, everything kind of starts like, you know, pumping up or whatever. And those two, you know, the graphics might not change there and there might not be too much different happening, but all of a sudden you're kind of being informed by this new style of music that's playing, right?
Yeah. Good example of that would be in the game Okami, which has a beautiful soundtrack, but you're kind of, you know, saving this land from a curse, and there's a lot of beauty in nature, and the music kind of reflects that. But there's these like cursed zones where as soon as you enter into that cursed zone, the music goes from this like beautiful orchestral sound to this like booming drum and loud like chants, and it's like, okay, I need to get away from here immediately, which I feel like would be another good example of, okay, this is what's going on because the music is telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say one of my favorite examples of this is definitely the Ace Attorney series. The music, how the music changes when you are in your like gathering the evidence phase and talking to witnesses versus we all know the courtroom music, and and when they say objection and how the music changes for that, how it creates tension as opposed to the inquisitive, mysterious but also chill moments that it has anytime outside of the courtroom.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is hitting on something I wanted to talk about, which is using music as a game design tool, right? Where I kind of started thinking about this real critically was reading through Jesse Schell's book, which is called The Art of Game Design. And in it, he has a bunch of different lenses where he talks about game design through. And there's one where it's sort of about indirect control, like guiding the player. And one of his examples is music. The idea, I mean, we're kind of talking about it here, right? When you said like in Metroid, there might be in the exploration phase, the music is chill and the player feels like they can take their time. And the music is encouraging you to take your time and poke around versus now it's a boss battle or now it's a, timed sequence and the music ramps up and you feel it and you don't even think about it, right?
Or it's the little jingle you get in Zelda when it's like, you fucking figured it out. Something like that can be like a tool, right? Like very much so. It's like, okay, well now I know I'm doing something right?
Yeah, or like, you come to associate sounds with enemies or whatever and you hear it and you're like, oh no, I know there's an enemy near that specific enemy nearby. I think about like maybe the Guardians or something.
It's the most notable one.
In Breath of the Wild. It's not a game example, but the real life example that he uses in the book that's really interesting is he talks about restaurants doing this where during a lunch rush, they'll play like dance music to get you to eat your food fast and get out of there and free up the table. But like in the slow afternoon, they want it to look like a busy restaurant and there's not that many people there. So they play slow music, which encourages guests to stay and linger and order more. Right. And, casinos and all sorts of like businesses use these things, and game design does and can too. And
Yeah. I think the music in Animal Crossing definitely is asking me to stay a while.
Definitely.
That's a great example. Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. To the extent that, in the interim between New Leaf and New Horizons, I had gotten an extension on my computer to play Animal Crossing music that was actually connected to my local time and weather. Nice. I needed it integrated in my real life.
I mean, that's a good example too, because that's a game where it's like, it's taking place in real time with the real world. And so it's like, if it was like, da 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 at like 3 a.m, I'd be like, bro, slow down. I'm trying to wind down,
always,
brother.
Yes. And some of the most fun and interesting songs are those 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. songs.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's their chance to be more chill, morose, melancholy, bittersweet.
Melancholy is a good word for it.
It gets very somber in the night on Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
So much so where it's like, should I close my DS and go to bed?
Yes.
It's definitely like, what kind of person are you that you're playing video games at 3 a.m? There's got to be something wrong.
Yes and no.
Like, this is very depressing.
Yeah. I kind of take it in both ways of, it gets you feeling a little like, wow, this is what I'm doing, but also this is here for me.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, can anybody think of, and I'm sure there are good examples of this, I don't have one, of examples where the music sticks out. Can we have this note in here about music sticking out or blending in, but it sticks out in a bad way, like where you're like, this doesn't fit, like kind of like what we're talking about, like something that's too fast for the gameplay or too slow for the gameplay. I don't know. I couldn't think of any personally. So maybe game designers are doing a great job.
I was to say, are you asking for examples that we think are bad?
I mean, there is like, like I've been playing a lot of like Mario's Picross for the Game Boy, right? And it's like, I feel like any game series that's been going on for a long time, the games like the developers learn how to make the games better over time, right? And they like have quality of life improvements, the controls get better and blah, blah, blah. I also think like the music has gotten better every single iteration of Picross, or at least like they've found now the right kind of tone for something that's going to carry you through like a little puzzle thing and kind of be like a little jazzy, but not too in your face. You know what I mean? But, you know, you're playing Mario Picross, and in addition to all the quality of life stuff being away, a lot of the music in there is just like really like high energy. And it's, you know, and you have to think of it was coming through the Game Boy speakers and you're playing in little bursts. So I kind of understand why, but it's like, I went through like all the different BGM options in that game, and I was like, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna put on a record or something while I play a podcast while I play this. You know what I mean? And so I think that there definitely can be situations where stuff feels like a little out of whack, and I think that's also just a good reason why there's always the ability to turn off music in games. I mean, that isn't always true, especially for Nintendo games. I wish that's something that they would do more often. But, you know, ideally you want to have an experience that is being improved by the game. But when it's not, you know, and especially like if you've listened to a song a million times in a game before and you're like, man, I've played this game for like 500 hours and I'm getting kind of sick of this song. Like having the ability to turn it off and kind of set the mood to whatever you want is kind of sick. Yeah, I think that the OG Xbox had a really cool feature. And I think the Steam Deck can do it now. But it was basically like you could put CDs into your Xbox and rip the CDs to your Xbox, and the songs would live on a hard drive. And you could turn the music off in a game and instead play whatever game music that you had like on the hard drive. You know what I mean? And that kind of in today's age is, you know, that's a bit little kaput, but I think that was a cool way that you could kind of craft a game and make it into your own thing with whatever kind of music you wanted, right? So I think that's a cool feature.
You can still do it with whatever like music app that you have on Xbox, and then it is pretty easy to get to those music controls. I play Fortnite that way too. I turn off the music but still have like the sound effects on.
I think specifically with like puzzle games like Picross, Tetris, the music should be really intentional and not too crazy. I feel like for me, there's a very like fine line between music that like helps me ease into the puzzle and then music that really takes me out. Cause it's like, there's this droning, repeating melody that it just becomes overwhelming if it's not, you know, kind of a simple chill tune.
Yeah. Tetris is actually a pretty good example of that with Tetris 99, because there are so many themes in Tetris 99.
Yes.
You know, and it's like some themes I just don't want to play because the music just does not fit.
I just can't do it. Yeah, I totally agree.
It's like it's either way too chill or it's just like really at odds with what I'm trying to do in the game, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good example.
I'm laughing to myself now too because my sister loves the Professor Layton games, and I had a hard time. I kind of had a hard time with them because I've not always been like that kind of puzzle minded, I guess, with those kinds of puzzle games. And so it's like the music or just it plays into the entire like thematics of those games of like being higher minded. And so like the music kind of has that sense to it too. And so like I'm here trying to play these puzzles and I'm not getting them, and the music is not making me feel better about it either.
Yeah.
I'm like, this game is making me feel dumb. I guess I'm dumb. Thanks, Professor Layton.
They also have a British accent, which makes me feel dumb.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. It's the voice of the intelligentsia.
Yeah.
It's actually not a video game, but there is a board game that I play with my wife sometimes called Pakal, and it is a puzzle game. You know, we all had as kids, or some of us did, the little squares where you move them around to form a picture or to put the numbers in order because there's one square that's missing, and there's a type of name for these puzzles, but it's basically the board game, and it comes with an app that you download that plays music for your rounds. That's like a timer. And if you play it without the music and just play it, it's so much more chill because the music is really intense and gets more intense as the timer gets close to being over. And it's already kind of an intense activity. And I think it just goes to show how music, can make a game feel that much more stressful. And sometimes that's why I could see people wanting to play something different that, when they're playing an already stressful game or what have you. But anyway, I wanted to mention a few things that I've kind of discovered and thought about through the development of Monochrome Heights and working with a composer. We talked about how video game music has to loop on the first time we did this episode, or the first time we did the first volume of this episode. And I feel like I really ran into that a lot with the composer during the game in interesting ways where, he'd be working on a song and we'd love it. And then it'd be like, but it's got a loop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and how do we figure that out for this song? And, you know, because he'd just be kind of making stuff, not like to finish it, you know, and then it'd be like, okay, but do we loop it by fading it, or do you need to like actually, you know, because a fade has silence then, even if it's just for a brief moment. It's just so important. There are so few places in a video game where music shouldn't loop, like hardly any. You know, maybe a cinematic that plays where you can't like stop it. It's the only situation, you know what I mean? Like,
where it shouldn't loop, you mean?
Yeah, like because you know, otherwise
there's other. I mean, there's title screens. There's like,
but even a title screen, if I sit on it, it should loop around, and that is actually a really interesting place where we purposefully chose a song that does end. Because I can't remember who, but my composer Ben Neatley was like, "There's some famous composer that said a main title screen should end to be like." Play the game.
Well, yeah. Well, it's also at title screens. It would also often then go to like a demo. It's like you sit on the title screen and then it plays, and then it's like you see like a demo of the game playing like on its own, right?
Right.
So, yeah. I think that's where my mind went. But I think also other times where it wouldn't loop would be like course clear or something like that, right? I think some
stingers.
Little stingers
and
right?
things like that. Or actually another interesting thing that I did want to talk about that, but I forgot to put on the notes. But like, like you think about Mario levels, how seamless it can kind of feel sometimes when you jump on like a flagpole and then the stinger plays, right? And we did that in Monochrome Heights too, because do we fade the music at the end of a level? No, we play a little stinger and it feels much better. Just talking about tone of a game and music fitting it. I commissioned the music really early on, and it really helped shape the vibe of the game. So much so that like some tracks were built for segments and things that don't exist anymore, and for story beats that were early on that just got wholly rewritten, but the music still fits because it was like what helped. I would listen to it making the game. And then something else that I'm kind of maybe transition to Molly as well is just how important sound effects are, like with the music, because they've got to work together. And I think, you know, if your sound effects don't fit with your music, that also can stand out. And when you listen to video game music without the sound effects, sometimes it can be a little jarring in a game that's very sound effects heavy to be like, oh, wait, this is what the song is without all the explosions and
sure
stuff. But those are things that I kind of discovered through, or, you know, deeper levels of understanding by working on the game.
Well, first thing that comes to mind from what you've said is I feel like Minecraft is a good de facto for sound effects. I've always enjoyed Minecraft. I think they're really satisfying noises. They're iconic. And when I was making the soundtrack for the game jam that I was working on, there were like elements in the game. Elements is in like earth, wind, fire, air. So there was a fireball, an ice freeze, a dash, a dig. And it's like, what does ice sound like? I don't know. So I made like a sharp little like dink sound, you know, like, is it ice breaking? Is it ice melting? For fire, there was this like deep drum and then a sound. But I had a lot of fun making the sound effects because of that. And it's just fun to mess around, but it can really take you out if it doesn't sound right. Like I had a really hard time with the level of the digging because it was like and totally distracting. So kind of going on like a tangent here, but yeah, sound effects are really important. It's tough to like mix for those as well. Like what's too loud, what's too quiet.
What's going to clash with the music too, right?
Exactly.
Because like I imagine that especially when you're doing sound effects in a like pixel art game or something that uses chip tunes or uses the same like sound chip theoretically, right? As like you would with like a, you know, like let's say it's a Super Nintendo or an NES game or something like that. Those are going to be toned effects, you know, unless they're like just noise layers or whatever, right? And even if they are noise layers, a lot of times if you've got a song that's using 4 channels or whatever on your NES game, it's going to be taking away, we talked about this some in that first episode that we did, but it's going to be taking away channels in order to get that sound effect out. So you kind of have to have a marriage of, what's going to work well and sound good and be representative of the sound that you're trying to evoke, but also not completely overpower or clash tonally. You just don't want something to be like discordant all of a sudden, unless, obviously that's the vibe you're going for.
Totally. Yeah. Like the first fire sound effect I made was like 5 seconds long, like a whoosh, just totally unnecessary, crazy thing, but had to kind of tone it down. And, it's good to understand the tone of the game and not go crazy in that respect. Like I said, it was very like element focused. Like there was a room for fire, a room for water, a room for air, and a room for earth. So I made a track for each room as well as like a main room theme. And it was really easy for me to create. I think it's because I was just on one of those creative kicks. So I did make the soundtrack, like the entire soundtrack, within the week that we got the theme of the game jam. And I feel like once you kind of get that kick, you have to keep rolling with it. And I did, and it was nice.
It's gotta be easier to write to when you've got, like this is going to be a fire level.
Yeah.
You already immediately know, like you were saying, Patrick, earlier, you can't make something that sounds like it's in an ice cave for a fire level, So it's like you already have like like when you're just like making music just to make music, you're like, I could write literally anything right now, But when you're like, okay, this is the tone for when somebody's stressed, or this is the tone for like the exploration phase or whatever, that's kind of a little bit of a starting position that is like kind of gets you over the line, I imagine, when you're like actually composing, right? And trying to figure out like what to do, what kind of like chord progressions you want to use, what kind of like lower end or higher end. I imagine that just kind of like helps to be within some parameters like that.
Totally. Yeah. Since the theme was like alchemy and shadows, there was kind of like a heavier undertone that we wanted. So in all of the songs, I tried to include like this really wavy wah, 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 like sound to, kind of tie it all together, put like themes within the music that people will recognize, like, oh, I heard this in the air room.
The little motifs.
And another thing that helped was like I made this with my friends. So we were kind of on the same page of what we wanted to accomplish and like what other games we enjoy or what other soundtracks we enjoyed that we wanted to take inspiration from. So I think another reason why I was so confident with like making the music for this was because, we all knew what we were doing. We're friends. It was just easy to work with them. So, yeah.
Very nice. Summer, you do a lot of video game music conventions and music covers and stuff. Do you have some things you want to share about that?
Sure. So, video game music covers is its own niche scene as well, to the degree that it has kind of become like my main like hobby and personality. I obviously love video games as a whole, but enjoying like I just counted and I am in like 12 different Discord servers that are all about like video game music covers, right? Like just different communities, like community groups that are dedicated towards either different events or organizations and like producers, producing groups for video game music covers. It's its own scene and just niche community. Yeah, I go to Mag West, Super Mag West. It stands for Music and Gaming Fest. It used to be music. It used to be Mid-Atlantic Gaming Fest, but they've always had like music has always been a really big focus of it. It is part music festival, part convention. They've always had the like convention side of things of gaming and panels, but they've also always had stages and they bring in different cover bands. And a lot of the time they bring in original artists too. For example, this past year, T. Lopez did a concert, of his original stuff for Sonic. Yes. And they also had Lotus Juice, who does all of the raps for all of the Persona games. That was really amazing. One of my favorite things about the video game music convention scene is doing specifically jam sessions, which if you've never done just like a normal like jam session, basically what happens is like a lead sheet is like thrown up for everybody to see, or they like expect you to bring in, your fake book of classics that everybody is expected to know. But this is the video game version of that. And a lot of the time they will, they'll pick a song and then they'll pick a genre or a style that they want to do it in as well. And you just pick an instrument, or like you bring your instrument, everybody takes turns doing solos. It's its own huge culture, and I am obsessed with it. I've been weaseling my way into doing more productions and covers with folks. I'm going to VGM Con next month in Minneapolis. I will be performing with my friend's band, Lauren the Flute, and her band, The Returners. So I'm going to be singing with them on some things. Also very just excited about like doing more jams. I love just literally like a bunch of like classically trained and like jazz musicians, but they just want to do video game music. That's how I spend my time anymore.
Yeah, we talked about it in another episode, but I think that like video game music has kind of become like jazz standards, like the new jazz standards. I think for a lot of up and coming like jazz musicians. I watched a whole kind of like video on that, which was really fascinating.
I know the one that you're talking about because they interview with the band leader of 8-Bit Big Band. And yes, if you're into that kind of thing, definitely check out 8-Bit Big Band. Also definitely check out, I like obviously biased because they're from here, but the Blue Shift Big Band is here in Chicago. They are a video game cover band, and just the things that they're doing with some of these songs is just they're doing some really, really cool stuff that nobody else is really doing right now. So I'm so obsessed with them. Please listen to them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit too before we get into the main kind of like us sharing some of our favorite songs for this round 2 of this episode. I did want to talk a little bit about like other forms of music in games. I think we should not really talk about rhythm games this episode because I think that's a whole can of worms and we could have a whole episode on that, and we probably should at some point. But what I wanted to talk about was, we are talking a lot about music that is being designed for games, but I think there's also a lot to be said about music, like licensed music being used in games, and then that being something that people discover a lot of music through. I think the big examples of that obviously are like Crazy Taxi. That was like my introduction to The Offspring and Bad Religion, and then, stuff like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which I think opened up an entire generation of kids to so many different genres of music, be it ska, hardcore, punk, hip hop. That was really a formative, soundtrack for me. And it really, turned me on to tons of bands that are some of my favorite to this day. Rage Against the Machine, was first time I ever heard them. First time I ever heard Motorhead, Adolescence, and a lot of these like bands from the Tony Hawk Pro Skater soundtrack still remain some of my favorites to this day. And then, also I would say like all the Grand Theft Auto games are a really good example of that too, because those are games that really benefit from like having they could have multiple genres of music due to the fact that there are different radio stations within the game. So it's like they can kind of put them into categories like that. But then when you've got a game like GTA Vice City that's set in the 80s, that's like a great opportunity to just be like, let's just put all our favorite 80s music into like this one game, and it becomes this kind of time capsule, right? And obviously we can't really play any of these for you because these are all like licensed tracks and we don't want to get demonetized or anything. But it's like, I think that that's like such an awesome part of video games that you also see in movies and stuff as well, obviously. But when you're watching a movie, like, they'll do like a needle drop or whatever in a scene, and it's like, oh, that's the perfect moment for this. But when you're playing a game, like, you'll hear that song like 500 times. So it's like, okay, yeah, you better like the song because it's going to be in your permanent playlist as you're playing.
I think GTA is a really interesting one because it makes a lot of sense in the world that you're driving a car and you turn the radio on and you can change the station. Like, I'm not saying Crazy Taxi or Tony Hawk doesn't make sense, but it's more like the way that it also fits in to the gameplay is really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that the soundtrack becomes diegetic within that game, right? It's like, it's not, I mean, there will be in action scenes non-diegetic score that happens in Grand Theft Auto games, right? But the music that everybody remembers is, it's because you flip on the radio dial in the car or whatever, and as soon as you step out, it stops, right? I know I had so many memories the first time I played Grand Theft Auto 3 for the PS2. I loved just putting on like the opera channel because it just made me feel like a fucking Italian mobster going around and doing these like epic car chases to opera music. It was just like the best, so it's that also gives you a little bit of player agency as well to kind of craft the tone as you're going through the games. Like what am I trying to evoke with my play right now? That kind of becomes something that the player can also control. So I definitely wanted to give a shout out to all the great games that have used licensed music in them as well.
Well, then maybe it's time for us to turn to, I'll give a couple of favorites. So David and I were on volume 1 of this, so we're going to give maybe some other favorites, new favorites. I don't know how you want to think of it, but
I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't necessarily call any of these songs my favorites. This is more just like what I'm vibing on today as I picked these tracks, And
I personally tried to pick stuff that was recent and or exemplified some of the things we talked about. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was from Hollow Knight, which got briefly mentioned in volume 1 at the end, but then we had to move on. And in particular, I want to talk about the Mantis Lords song. All the music in the game was done by Christopher Larkin. Okay, so this is a really key point in the game where I think a lot of people drop off before this, but if you push through and play this fight, it's a really kind of a game changer almost. It's like, for me, it was when I felt all in on the game, and I think that's true for a lot of people. And I think it's also a really great example of the music changing. You have the exploration music, you go into the fight, it gets really intense, and it's a really cool song. You beat them, ideally, and it just goes quickly back to that quiet, gentle Hollow Knight exploration music, because the Mantis Lords are they're like a bottleneck. You can't get to a lot of the game until you beat them. And it's like, now you have a lot more to explore. So it's a really great example of some of the things we've talked about. And it's also a really great example of sound effects. Listening to this song without the fight sounds is weird, because there's so many, you're fighting, the Mantis Lords have sound effects, the Knight has sound effects when you fight them. I think when I listened to the song, which was just the song on YouTube, everybody's like, this is strange without all the sword swings and stuff like that. And it just feels like such the right song for that moment too.
Yeah. That reminds me of so many games where, like, you'll just be, you're listening to a song like in, like, say, a Mario game or something, and you're trying to like jump to the beat. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not necessary at all, but it's just like, it feels good to like do little turns or whatever and add to the soundtrack as you're playing. I don't know. That's what that reminds me of, what you just said.
Well, I've been playing a lot of Persona 5 Royal recently, and I thought maybe just as another sort of example, talk about Last Surprise. Every time I still think about this game, I think just about how style is so important to it. And I feel like Last Surprise, it has lyrics. It plays a lot in the game during regular battles early on. And it just works in a weird way.
Yes.
It's kind of like...
So good.
That is such an amazing song. It's stuck in my head all the time.
I literally have a highlight reel of all of the times that I sang, like that I've performed this song live, because it's so good. And it's like, for me, like it's just perfectly in my range and my style. Obsessed.
Yeah.
I've seen you sing it before.
That's right.
Part of the reason I brought it up.
You were at one of my performances.
But I now get it more than ever because I've been playing it, and now it's stuck in my head all the time too.
Oh yeah.
I love that it's got such like a silly kind of like dancey vibe, and it's the kind of song that you think would get old, but it truly never does. And it happens all the time because you're constantly battling in that game when you're in the dungeons.
Never see it coming.
Oh, okay. Well, then the one of the last examples I want to talk about was a game, some video game music that I've talked a lot about on the podcast, and that's the Famicom Detective Club Emio the Smiling Man soundtrack. And because I had to pick one song, I chose The Smiling Man. Honestly, like, I don't even know if this song exemplifies all the things I want to talk about, but I think it does exemplify tone and how different scenes in the game, have different tones, because there's parts where you're just investigating and it's chill city pop music. And then this is like a really creepy, more intense song that plays during more intense moments. But just the soundtrack in general, talking about like 80s music and city pop, like I wasn't even familiar with city pop as a genre before this game. And now I also like, it is, sort of 80s based J-pop, right? Like, yeah. And it really fits because this game is set in like, I guess, I'm not exactly sure because there are cell phones, but it's super early cell phones.
Right.
They kind of shoehorned them in a little bit, but it just really does feel like it fits the era, and the game has a good variety of music all within that style, but for the different moments. And this one in particular is the one I go back to just because I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, city pop is one of those genres of music that has like really blown up in the era of the internet. Like, I feel like there are some genres of music that are basically YouTube genres. It's like you don't really like, you can listen to city pop if you like go to Japan and buy like city pop albums. And I think that there are more people that are actually they're doing re-releases of city pop, but for so long, that was just stuff that you couldn't find on any like iTunes or American streaming services, right? So that you just find these amazing vaults of just all these Japanese soundtracks, or not even soundtracks, just albums from that era on YouTube, and you have these crazy compilations of stuff like that. City pop is one of those to me, and I think I'll go next because another one of those to me that really reminds me of like a YouTube genre is like drum and bass or like jungle music, right? And I think I have become I am going through like a big time jungle renaissance right now as far as like the kind of stuff that I like to listen to. And there's a couple that I have on here that I really want to talk about. One of them is like from the Ridge Racer Type 4 soundtrack. Ridge Racer Type 4 was a PS2 game, and it had an amazing soundtrack. There's a million good ones, and it's kind of all got a wide variety of electronica like throughout that soundtrack. Like there's stuff that's a lot more funky, stuff that's a lot more drum and bass, there's stuff that's a lot more like kind of like club techno, but whatever it is, it feels super inspired and always seems to fit the mood. I think racing games really benefit oftentimes from having like really cool electronic soundtracks. I mean, there are different ones that have different vibes. Like, for instance, if you're talking like F-Zero X has like a much more like metal soundtrack, but then F-Zero GX has a lot more of like that driving electro that you get from Amusement Vision, which I'm sure we'll bring up later in this episode. But Ridge Racer Type 4 has an amazing soundtrack. And then while we're on the kind of genre of jungle, I did want to bring up Bomberman Hero as a soundtrack. That was in the kind of N64 era of D&B and jungle that would come out, and particularly the song Redial. This was just kind of out in that time. There was like an era basically in like the mid 90s up to like the early 2000s where like jungle was just in everything, right? And those to me were like the glory days of video game soundtracks. I really, really love all that stuff. And then you can, if you like this, there's just millions of compilations on YouTube to put on. And I think for me, like jungle music, and especially like atmospheric drum and bass and stuff like that, really kind of puts me into this trance state. And I think a lot of that is, I grew up playing a lot of these games, and so it kind of brings me back to a more nostalgic time. But I do also think it's, like the kind of amen break that kind of makes up jungle music and drum and bass. Like there's some magic sauce in the amen break, and I'm not sure what it is, but it just kind of like puts you into like a flow state, and I just love that style of music, so I definitely wanted to give that a shout out there. I've got a couple other I'd like to bring up. One of them is from the soundtrack to the game Klonoa. Klonoa has a very varied soundtrack, and there's a lot going on in it. But one of my favorites is from towards the end of the game, and it's called The Closing Encounter. I think the reason I wanted to bring up this song is that when you talk about different kinds of tones, Patrick, the game starts with this really playful, childish refrain that just kind of happens a lot in the early game. And I think it feels almost like kind of corny, and you're playing and you're like, man, what is this soundtrack? I mean, it's not that it's bad music, it's all amazing. But then it's like, as the game progresses and you really get towards the end and it gets more and more difficult, the music ramps up, and it happens like really naturally up until you hit this track, and all of a sudden it's this like thumping electronic beat. And I just remember the first time I played this game, I had to just stop and like pause the game and just kind of like listen to it for a really long time. And that's always been my favorite track from this game, and it's an amazing soundtrack all the way through. This is one that I own on vinyl.
Great bass synth in that one.
Yes, absolutely. Another song I wanted to bring up from a game that I played more recently is from the game Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds is a really special game, and the song in particular that I wanted to bring up was the song that comes up when you end a loop in that game, and that's called End Times. This song to me is like really important to the entire experience of Outer Wilds, and I think it's one that anybody who's played the game immediately knows what I'm talking about. The game works on this like cyclical loop of like 22 minutes, and basically, not to spoil too much about the game, because it is a game you want to go in blind on, but every 22 minutes the universe explodes and you have to start back over, right? So you'll be going out and you're exploring. It's a very Myst-like game. Myst also has an amazing soundtrack, but I'm trying to stay in my lane here. As you're going, there's a lot of atmospheric stuff, but then you're cued into the fact that, oh, no. Everything's about to end now when this song starts playing. So it's weird because it's a very comforting song, and it's very like relaxing in a lot of ways. Like the way that it's written is emotional, and it evokes, the end of something enormous happening, obviously, but also it can be very stress-inducing, because oftentimes you'll have gotten finally to this place that you've been looking for in the game forever, and then this song starts playing, and you're like, no, wait, I don't want to die, I've got so much more I want to do, I forgot how I even got here, so it's so evocative in so many ways, and I just think from a game that is so built around music, and I think so much of the Outer Wilds is built around the idea of instrumentation and instruments playing together and people playing music at the same time, having this song be like a big indicator and kind of gameplay element like you were talking about before, Patrick. I really wanted to give this one a shout out.
I can go next because my first one plays into the D&B jungle genre that you were paying homage to. Probably my favorite soundtrack in a video game ever would be from Super Monkey Ball that released on the GameCube in 2001. Mm-hmm. And the song that I'd specifically like to talk about would be the castle theme. This soundtrack is very drum and bass, very like early 2000s trance. For those who are unaware of what Monkey Ball is, you're a monkey in a ball rolling through a puzzle to get to the finish. So it's
very well said.
Yeah, it has like a kiddie theme to it. If you look at it, you would imagine the music would be like, oh yay, monkeys! But then you play the game and it's like, I would like rave to this at a show. Mm-hmm. When you first play through the stages, the music's kind of like groovy, but then as it goes on, the themes shift up, the stages change, and you enter into this world in the sky. When this castle theme starts playing, it has these crazy drum beats, these swelling synthesizers, and it's like, okay, shit's getting serious now. It's hard now. I played this as a kid, and I remember thinking like, okay, these are the hard stages because the sound is cool now. But both Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2 have just a great drum and bass influence that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, totally. And it's also just adding on to that real quick. It's like something that I think has been really hard for the Monkey Ball franchise to like come back to. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like all of the new Monkey Ball games that have come out since have gone with a much more like playful kind of like, or like it thematically makes more sense with the kind of game that it is, but it loses something completely in the translation. So much so that whenever I play the new Monkey Ball games, I just put on the original soundtracks.
I have the exact same issues. All of the games after 1 and 2, I find the music to be really underwhelming. They set the bar really high with the first one, but yeah, thematically it does make more sense. The second one I'd like to talk about would be the soundtrack from Trauma Center, Second Opinion. And I would specifically like to talk about Code Blue, the song that plays during surgery. This one was composed by Shoji Meguro, and I think another composer in this game actually did the soundtrack for the Persona games, Kenichi Tsuchiya. I'm not sure if he made this song, but basically this game, Trauma Center, you are a surgeon performing surgery with your Wiimote and nunchuck. So, there's like this underlying disease. You start to see it in the patients. It starts to get more serious. But when you're in surgery, this game or this song is playing and it's like, okay, it's like this intense da-da-da-da-da-da. And, your cursor's on the screen shaking because your hands are shaking and you're performing a surgery. It's a really cool song. There's like this beautiful piano melody that comes in and ends on this major note, and then it loops back. This is a good example of a good loop, in my opinion. But yeah, I really like the full soundtrack of Trauma Center, Second Opinion. The next one I'd like to talk about would be the Hotline Miami soundtrack.
Oh, hell yeah.
And yeah, specifically the song Crystals by Moon. Hotline Miami is like a top-down shooter, pixely, super fast, very brutal, very violent, deals with, heavy topics like sex, drugs. And this soundtrack is perfect for those themes and the game. In this song in specific, there's like this really fast synthesizer sequence, like in it, the variation slowly switches up throughout the song, but it's just this driving beat that really makes you want to just clear the map. You're going through this map over and over again until you completely finish it, and it's perfect for that. Moon didn't compose all of the songs in this soundtrack, but he composed a lot of it. He's really good, and the other composers in the game are great, but they've really captured this like synthwave rushed, just cool sound that, I typically don't really play games like Hotline Miami, but it's one of my favorites for that reason.
Yeah, all the songs too, they're not like standard kind of like, you'd think because like the visuals and aesthetics of that game are like kind of very like vaporwavy, kind of throwback. But all of the songs feel like they're kind of like fucked up or like kind of drunk. It's like they're all like a little weird and idiosyncratic. And I think it like really pushes home the vibe of the game as something like more unique than just like go into the room and kill a bunch of guys. It's like
totally,
it's like you're wearing these weird animal masks and the vibes are really fucked, and it's like, and it's just the soundtrack does so much heavy lifting, I think, for that game. It's definitely one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
Yeah, and in one of the other songs from this soundtrack, there's like a sound clip of someone snorting cocaine. Like it, all of that is just throughout the entire soundtrack, and I think it's fantastic. I would also like to talk about Neon White, specifically the song Rigged Game by Machine Girl. So this game was released in 2022, and Machine Girl is an electronic duo who makes really like harsh synthesizer kind of techno music, and they made the soundtrack for this whole game. This is another very quick-paced game where it's a platformer, but you also have cards that like give you guns and abilities, and like Hotline Miami, you are running through stages over and over until you finish it. So it has this cool like driving kind of sounds like a ascending and descending just rush hyperness. It just makes me really excited. It makes you want to just roll through it. It's kind of creepy. There's like a yell at one point in the song. In the game, you are a demon, so it fits with the theme. Yeah. I like how urgent it feels, and yeah, this is just another one that really hypes me up and totally adds to the game for me.
I love in the soundtrack whenever like there'll be a random little vocal sample in where it's like heaven is a trip or like something like out of nowhere, and you're just like, ooh, what a fun little delight we just got there.
Yeah, another great soundtrack. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about Military Madness, which was released in 1989 on the TurboGrafx. And specifically, I really enjoy the map theme. So this one is really close to my heart because the first time I played this game was on the Virtual Console with my dad, and he was so pissed at me because I wasn't understanding anything. And it was one of those, father-daughter, you suck at this game, get pissed off bonding experiences. This is a strategy game where it's a turn-based strategy game. You're in tanks and you're trying to defeat this alien force on the moon that is trying to shoot a missile at the Earth. It's a really pretty simple game, but a lot of fun. And for me, the soundtrack to this game is the reason why I like it. This song in specific is very harsh and has like a lot of sawtooth wave for like synth waves. And it just feels like the layering is thin, but the noises are very intense and it feels spacey. Like, when this one plays, you're looking at the map and you're about to go into a game and it's like, okay, you're in space, you're preparing for this mission. It just feels right for the theme. I love the melodies in this game. It's so underrated. There was a remake made for the Xbox, and the soundtrack is kind of different for that. I would recommend this original TurboGrafx soundtrack. It's just so sawtoothy, harsh, and really vibey.
Yeah. The TurboGrafx had an amazing sound chip too. It's just like all the tones they were able to pull out of that system were so good. And you saying that really reminded me of just like map music in general, like the overworld map themes in video games. I feel like oftentimes are some of my favorite tracks from game OSTs. Like I'm reminded of Penny's Big Breakaway, like the kind of world map song there. I think it's just such a good bop. And there's a few others too, like Star Fox is a really good one. Mario Brothers 3, and I think the reason those map overworld songs are often so good is because like they know you're not gonna like sit on that for a really long time. It's not like a level where you're gonna be in the level and it's gonna have to be like a 2-minute song that loops over that amount of time. You have to make it interesting for that amount of time. It's usually just like a couple measures refrain that is then going to repeat because all you're doing is going in and selecting the level you're going to play. So they really slam everything that they can into that like couple measures, and it always makes them like so groovy and I don't know. I just love overworld music, and that really reminded me of that.
Yeah, good loops that work.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I'll go next. And the first game soundtrack that I want to discuss is Nier Automata. I don't know how I want to pronounce it. Everybody says it differently. Automata. I think both are actually correct. And I had such a hard time picking like a specific moment that I wanted to talk about because the soundtrack is one of my like maybe favorite examples of like audio design and soundtrack used in gameplay and narrative. But for the sake of this podcast, I have chosen to talk about the song literally called A Beautiful Song. A Beautiful Song plays during a boss fight with this robot lady who is just, she desires to be beautiful, and not to get too much into the themes of the game and just the overall story, but the soundtrack is already so like the ambiance is just so high level. So anytime the music changes like this to a boss fight, you know that it's time to lock in, but also tensions are extremely high, and the utilization of themes that we've already been hearing, bringing us back to themes that, you know, throughout the game of like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have morals? What does it mean to be beautiful? How do all these things play into each other? Is like the major themes of this boss fight as well. So seeing that like cultivate to this particular moment, plus the chaos language in that they made up their own language for all of the soundtrack. It's gorgeous. I mean, that's what happens when you combine Latin, French, and Japanese, I guess, is, you know, chaos. That's chaos. But yeah, overall, though, this soundtrack is just, I was quickly picking up on it as I was playing through the game of how intentional so much of the audio design and music was to things that were happening as gameplay, not just cutscenes, but as gameplay. And that is really, really valuable, valuable piece of storytelling. I love my interactive media. Next, it was so hard for me to narrow down like a specific. Okay, first of all, Pokemon is just very vast, and anybody that knows me knows how strongly I feel about Pokemon, generally speaking. So, in my efforts to narrow down specifically what I wanted to discuss with Pokemon, I remembered how with Pokemon Emerald specifically, I would sit on the porch at my grandparents' house with my grandfather, and who was blind, but he was a musician and just wanted to know what I was into. And we would just sit and listen to the opening suite from Pokemon Emerald when you turn the game on. It's the first thing that you hear and see. The Pokemon Emerald opening suite is a great just glimpse at the kind of stylings that you'll hear within the rest of, and it's the same as Ruby and Sapphire to an extent. I believe it's a little more flourished for Emerald. It takes the original Pokemon theme from the original Pokemon games, Red and Blue and Green, and takes it into like styles and also borrows motifs that are present in Emerald. And it just, Pokemon music generally, it's not anything necessarily revolutionary, but it definitely was some of the first music that opened my eyes and like a lot of other people like as children for imagining beyond what, you know, is right in front of us. And that's kind of what the soundtrack means to me. And specifically like the opening to Emerald is like the possibilities and just the instrumentation on the Game Boy Advance to everything. Everybody likes to talk about the trumpets in Hoenn specifically. Yeah, lots of trumpets. But just being able to like visualize and feel all of the instrumentation, even though it's on the Game Boy Advance, was just really special back then. And it wouldn't be me talking about music or games if we didn't talk about Fire Emblem Three Houses. Specifically, I do want to talk about the main vocal theme, Edge of Dawn. Reach for my hand, I'll soar away into the dawn. Oh, I wish I could stay. I want to cite a very specific moment that led to me meeting one of my now core friend groups. It was my first MagFest, and we saw a group of Fire Emblem Three Houses cosplayers hanging out in one of the lobby bars. And we were like, you know what, we're going to go hang out with them, or we're just going to tell them that we like their cosplays. We all ended up hitting it off really, really well. Somebody bought shots for the table and we toasted. We just sang, we filled the atrium space with this song. We sang through the first verse and chorus, just a cappella, this group of 30 cosplayers to this song. And now we are like ride or die friends. Just like that moment solidified. It's an incredible soundtrack. The themes are really fantastic. That song in particular, one of the definitely better themes throughout the entire Fire Emblem franchise.
I have a kind of a memory with this song as well. This is a game that I played with my ex, Sasha. And when we were playing this game, oftentimes, whenever the battle theme would happen, we made up our own lyrics for it, which was just, it's time for crests. It's time for crests now. Because of that one guy is always asking for your crests. And so we just, I don't know, it sparked a memory in me. So I had to share.
I love that. I love that for you. And the last game I want to talk about is Splatoon.
Let's go.
Specifically going to talk about Splatoon 3 because we did get a lot of music back from the first two games. We love to talk about all of the different groups and bands that have been created specifically for Splatoon. And if you are a Splatoon fan, you would know that the last Splatfest that we got, the Grand Festival, we got this powerhouse song that featured the main idol groups from all three games called 3 Wishes. So I've been a fan of Splatoon since day one. I am a ride or die Callie and Marie fan. I love them so much. Not that I don't love the rest of the idols. I love them. I love them too. I love them all. But the fact that those two open up this song, and the song is basically this beautiful, gorgeous idol pop ballad that's kind of a looking back at the past, what we've had, looking at what we have currently now in the present, and looking towards the future. It does feel like standard idol, like Japanese idol song in that way. Love it when idols do these kinds of themes in their music. Love it even more because they did it in Splatoon. I have to do this, guys. This song is also so incredibly meaningful for me and I think our friend group because our good friend Ivy passed away right before we participated in the Splatfest. And the themes of the Grand Festival and this song just felt way too on the nose for everything that we were feeling when we were playing this. And as I love idol culture and I love standing my idols and those kinds of emotions, idols. I love idols, and that's part of why I love Splatoon. Bringing out those kinds of emotions and feelings, and it's also just awesome within the game. We all, hung out in this literal music festival within the game together. It's just. Idols combined with a shooter that, it was finally a shooter that got me to play a shooter. What's better than this?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was deeply emotional. And that final Splatfest for Splatoon 3, which is kind of the de facto end of the game. Yeah. And it's the end of their support of the experience. Just timing out with what our community was going through at that time, and then they put their whole ass into animating this performance and having this final show feel like a big climactic thing. It was a very serendipitous moment that made it so much. It's already made to be a super important moment in the game, and it just added so much worth past that to it because of what we were all going through. Man, that's a really good call, Summer. Not least of all, it's just music plays such a huge part in all the Splatoon games. I can't believe this is the first time we're talking about Splatoon. Oh no, that's what I call whatever these fucking episodes are called. But it's like the fact that it's like the characters that guide you through the game are musicians, right? And you know, they have like the jukeboxes in the game, and it's all like very much built into the world. Like if the Splatoon soundtracks didn't work, I don't think any of the game would really work.
Sure.
Right? And
it's like it's truly all of the high points and things that you like wanted to highlight about you know, the licensed music in non-rhythm games, but they did it entirely self-encompassing.
Right. It's licensed music from the universe of Splatoon.
It really is. It is entirely right, self-contained. They've made their own identity out of it. And that's how it functions, is like the music that you hear in the fights are canon. Like, that's part of the canon is, oh, we're putting on this song for this match. Hope you like it. And like the way that the music changes, you know, in the final minute, it's canon to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we need to wrap this up, but there's one sort of final talking point we want to mention, and that is in the first time we did this episode on Volume 1, we kind of talked about how hard it is to find music online, especially like Spotify, and how YouTube is really the place. But Nintendo was taking down things from YouTube, and since then, Nintendo has released its music app.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's notable that it just now that it exists, because it's kind of funny when I went back to listen to that episode and we talked about there being a video game music app. Well, it's not for all video game music. It's just Nintendo, though it is still a little bit light. They want to do the drip feed strategy. I don't know if there's anything y'all want to say about.
I mean,
Nintendo
they did
music
just
app.
release today 3 games at once for the first time. They released, I think it was NES Tetris, Game Boy Tetris, and Game Boy Dr. Mario soundtracks. All 3 at once, kind of random. I guess it makes sense that they would drop them all at once, but I think it's great, and it's a good step in a good direction. I think a lot of people give this app a bunch of shit because it is kind of slim pickings, and it's like you just want everything to be on there at once, and they're kind of like doling it out, right? And it's obviously it's a perk of their subscription service, so it's something that they want to kind of dangle the carrot in front of you as that you hope they add your favorite soundtrack next week, right? It's like gachapon for music, but like I think it's great, and I think that it makes a lot of sense too in a world where Spotify, for all its conveniences, don't do jack shit for people who actually like own the license to the songs that are on there, right? Like artists that, not saying that Nintendo is paying any of the artists on the Nintendo Music app. I mean, let's get real, but I know why they wouldn't want to put all their stuff up on Spotify, right? And so it kind of, I think it's a good thing ultimately for this stuff to be available. I still think that like YouTube is probably the best place to listen to video game music, but having like an official compilation or official collection within an app that you can listen to, I think is great. And I think something that this app does that no other app does, which I love, is the ability to loop songs. Like we talk a lot in video game music, these video game music episodes, about the loopability of a lot of these songs. Like you can have a song play for like 2 minutes, or that you can extend it to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even like an hour sometimes on this app, right? And I think that's so cool. And that's like something that you can only really have when your app is built around video game music itself. And so I don't know. I think it's great that Nintendo's finally done this.
All right, then. I think that's it.
Can I do one more?
Sure.
I just want to quickly say, because this song is kind of a meme at this point, Buck Bumble.
What about now? It's time to rock with
the theme song from Buck Bumble is one of the best soundtracks ever. You gotta listen to that. It is like the ultimate in UK garage, like trashy, like that early 2000s, like shit that was coming out of the UK. Man, you just gotta check that one out. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to get it before we ended. I just wanted to give Buck Bumble a shout out. Go listen to that soundtrack. It's amazing.
All right, well, that will do it then for this volume 2 of Now That's What I Call Video Game Music. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. I'm still playing lots of Persona 5 Royal. I really am enjoying it. I don't know that I have a whole lot to say about it. I'm in the second palace of the game and enjoying it. I'm playing it in small bursts because that's what I have, but I'm not dropping off yet. And then I continue to play Party House. I introduced my cousin to the game when he was over. We play a lot of Smash together, and we played some Smash, and then we played some Party House. And I'm almost dismayed to say that he beat me the second game. I was giving him too much advice, I think. And I even gave, at some point he was like, all right, you can stop now. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not a fucking idiot, Patrick.
and then I regretted giving him so much advice. Maybe not really, but I don't know. It's a great multiplayer game. So those are some of the things that I've been playing recently.
Yeah, I whenever I play that game with people, I also am teaching it to them as we're going. And I find that everybody, after a certain point, starts to just do the opposite of whatever I tell them to do. And then they inevitably lose. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to fuck you over, man. That
actually happened with my cousin too. I don't know how you can make any of the characters that bring guests with them work. And I said that to him, and maybe there's a strategy out there, right? But I don't know what it is. And he was like, well, I'm going to buy it anyway. And then he kept getting fire code violations. And I was like, I told you not to do it, you know?
Yeah, I never pick anybody who brings more people because I'm just so traumatized by fire code violations. Yeah. If you don't know this game, this probably makes no sense to you, but it's a very, very good game. I'll go next. I played the Tetris Maximus Cup from Tetris 99. So I got that Xenoblade Chronicles X theme. I also have been playing a lot more Mario's Picross for the Game Boy. I am kind of embarrassed how much I have of that game completed at this point, given that I just already play a shit ton of Picross. But I did want to give a shout out to the one new game that I played this week, which is a game called Qualia. This is made by somebody that I follow on Blue Sky, who goes by Alcy. I think this is her first game. She's like a filmmaker, and she's got a game company called CMY2K, which is a cheeky name right there. But Qualia is like a game that you can really beat in 15 minutes if you're just going for one ending. It is made entirely in HTML. It's all text-based with a couple videos here and there, but you're basically sitting at a terminal, and the whole game kind of plays out through text. And it's essentially you are given two responses to questions, and you have to decide who is the artificial person and who is a real person. You're basically administering a Turing test, right? And so kind of the point of the game, you're trying to figure out who has the more robotic answer. Is this AI truly passing the Turing test or whatever? But then kind of the twist of the game, I don't want to give too much away, but kind of the twist of the game really is that it kind of turns on you, and it kind of makes the player question whether or not they're a real person or if they are just an algorithm themselves, right? And so you can imagine there are a little bit of twists and turns, and it kind of is a very existential kind of game. And I had a wonderful time playing this. This game is free on Steam, which I did not know going into it. I was ready to slap down what I assumed would be $5 on this game. It's completely free to play. I really recommend it. It'll play literally on anything because it's all just literally made in HTML. But it's a wonderful game. And I just want to give a shout out to the dev who came and watched my stream when I streamed this game. I think I had a couple other people in the stream earlier, and then everybody left. So it ended up just being me and the dev playing through the game, essentially together, which was really cool because I got to hear some of her insights on why she did certain things. And also whenever I got stuck, she would kind of nudge me in the right direction. And it was great. We ended up having a kind of a conversation about AI and where we thought about the future of technology is going. And it ended up just sparking a lot of conversation. And I ended up having a really good time playing that game. So I want to give a shout out to Qualia. Definitely check it out. It's free on Steam. It'll play on your MacBook and stuff. So go and play that if you have a chance.
Cool. I'll go next. I had people coming over to my house, so I made them play Super Mario Party Jamboree, naturally. I'm still really liking it, and I'm realizing that there's still a lot I actually haven't done, even though I feel like I've played it a lot. There's a lot more to unlock, then I maybe took it for it. This is the first Mario Party game I've ever actually really owned, so I didn't realize, like, I didn't know what to expect of like how much there would actually be to like unlock and kind of explore as you get it. Like for example, I thought I had purchased all of the emotes, and it turns out that I hadn't, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm still unlocking these. But it's a lot of fun. I bully anybody I can to play Mario Kart or Mario Party whenever possible. I did play a little Mario Kart as well because, like, again, people are over. That's what you do when people come over. But when people can't come over and you live far away from each other, you play Final Fantasy XIV. You play it late into the night so you can play with your friends that live in New Zealand. And you get bullied into learning about the gold saucer, which, if you don't play Final Fantasy XIV, the gold saucer is basically the casino. It is gambling. It is where you play all kinds of games and you try to save up as many points as you can, because I need the bunny suit. I need the bunny suit outfit. I need to get bunny ears. I need to get a bunny suit. Anybody that knows me, as soon as I saw it, I said to my friends, I was like, I know what I'm going to be making for Bunny Hutch next year. I know that I want to replicate a bunch of these games now in real life and put on my own gold saucer. The like hyperfixation was immediate. And when I'm not playing games with friends and I'm playing alone, I am still getting through Yakuza 0. I think I'm about halfway through it though. I feel like, I'm trying to make story progress on this because the plot is plotting. I love Kiryu. I love Majima. If you look like Majima, I am free Thursday night. Please call me. And
come on now.
No, truly though, Yakuza 0, like I get it now. I'm gonna be playing through these games. I'm about, I think I'm like about halfway through it, maybe a little past halfway. Excited to see the rest of it. Yeah. Molly, what have you been playing?
Yeah, I'll go last. I have been playing a lot of Fortnite. I have an interesting relationship with this game where I like play it a lot for like a month and then I don't touch it for like a year. And then new skins come out that I'm super into and then I hop back in. This instance was Hatsune Miku. Yeah, there was a Hatsune Miku chapter that came out maybe about a month ago, but that re-sparked my interest. Otherwise, I played Dead by Daylight pretty consistently. Like I'll just play a couple of rounds here and there. That's like an asymmetrical horror game where there's one killer versus 4 survivors. The survivors are trying to escape. Really love horror. So I love Dead by Daylight. I think it's fun. And I've also been playing Stardew Valley, which has been consistent in my life for years at this point. I'm the type of person who will not ever start a new save file or a new island on Animal Crossing. I feel like I start and then I'm in it. Like I have to commit to whatever it is. So I'm currently in like year 5. I have one divorce. I erased her memory. And now I'm married to someone else. And now I'm debating on inviting this sewer goblin to live with me platonically. It's just a lot of fun. And the 1.6 update came out like, I think a few months ago at this point, and I'm still discovering new content from that. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got back into it recently too because they added a bunch of new stuff and it's always fun to see what else is in there. I feel like there's like new patch notes every single day.
Yeah.
It's amazing you can play that game for that long and like still have things to do and stuff to see and things to find. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Concerned Ape rocks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is going to do it then for this episode. Now that's what I call Video Game Music Volume 2. Thank you, Molly, so much for coming and joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks as well to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. And thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. And thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon. If you're looking for me, Patrick, online, you can find me as PDYX.
You can find me at Weebwitched.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Molly? Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at _MollyPhoenix_. And I also just made a YouTube channel for my music. So if you're interested in hearing it, I am Numbra. And you can find me at Numbra_MNP on YouTube.
Very good. Yeah, definitely check that out. Molly's an awesome musician, and more people should be listening to your music because it's all super great. Can't wait to hear whatever game you work on next. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Blue Sky and Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We got a website, switchheadz.com, and we have a Facebook group, a Discord, and a Patreon. We'd love it if you could chuck it $1 over at the Patreon. Please join us on the Discord. What an amazing place to meet people. That's where we met Molly for the first time. This person popped in to the Discord, was like, hey, I'm starting at episode 1 of the show. We were like, what the fuck? Why are you doing that? And then here we are. So the Discord to guest pipeline is real, as Weist here can attest to. Yeah, like we said, please shoot us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, and tell your friends about the show. We would appreciate that greatly. That's going to do it for this episode. I'm so glad we finally did a volume 2. Hopefully volume 3 will not take another 5 years to come out. I'd like to do this kind of episode a lot more frequently. So if you enjoyed this, please let us know in the comments. Please let us know if you like the format or if there's anything else that you'd like to see from these kinds of episodes. But other than that, gang, you guys know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Why don't you download the Nintendo Music app and listen to an hour-long loop of the map theme from the original Mario Brothers. Anyway, we love you very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.